Calories in versus calories out is absolutely true. It is absolutely the mechanism that our bodies use to create our energy and therefore to lose fat, right? If we don't supply enough energy to our bodies with food to perform our calories out, it will draw calories from our body fat stores. Calories in versus calories out is absolutely true, but it's not helpful advice. And that's the thing. Sometimes you see on one hand, you have this person who just preaches that calories in, calories out isn't even true, and it's your hormones and it's ingredients, and that's not productive. It's not true. On the other hand, sometimes you'll have this person, sometimes I see influencers, whoever, and they just come across with an angry tone, and they kind of have this attitude that if you are overweight or obese, it's just because you're not a hard worker and you're not disciplined, and it's calories in, calories out, and nothing matters, and they're just kind of angry and aggressive. And I don't love that. I hope not to come across that way. I want to be very adamant about what science is actually. But again, just saying calories in, calories out, screaming it at somebody is not helpful. It's not useful, practical advice that somebody can implement. It's the same, for example, as if somebody was in debt. Say that somebody graduated college and they're finally working their job and they're trying to pay off their student loans, and maybe they're asking you for advice, or if you were some financial advisor or somebody, and you're like, okay, well, what steps can I take to get out of my student loan debt? And you just screamed at them. You were like, well, you need to spend less money than you earn and use the money left over to pay off your debt. It's like, okay, I think most people understand that, but they're asking for tools. They're asking for strategies, plans of how they can do that. But you're like, just spend less money than you earn and spend less money than you earn, and then you'll get out of student loan debt. It's not that people don't understand that. It's that they struggle with realistic applications of how to make that happen. And so at this point, that is what I want to do for you, is help give you some meaningful tools to do that. Now, the first piece of advice that I would want to give is going to apply differently to different people depending on where they are in their journey, where their starting point is, but it is that of habits. First of all, a lot of things that are sort of, lose 100 pounds in 100 days, and lots of things you see on like magazines is really rapid weight loss goals or programs are not effective, and I don't encourage that anybody tries them out. I really think that most people would be a lot more successful in their weight loss goals if they considered how much progress they're going to make in the course of years rather than months or weeks. And the way that we do that is to find healthy habits that promote our movement in the direction that we hope to go. Now, as I said, depending on where you are, you might have some of these habits formed already. You might be, in a middle stage of this. But what I want to do is describe the process of habit forming that I would recommend to somebody who is obese and has very poor diet habits and has very poor exercise habits, and then how I would take them from where they are, slowly making habits to where they want to be. Now again, say we have somebody who is very overweight, has very, very low levels of physical activity, and has very, very unhealthy diet. They are really starting from ground zero, but they're trying to improve. The first thing that I would want them to do is just add into their diet and add into their routine a little bit of healthy habits. So, for their diet, I wouldn't even start by having them try to restrict anything. I wouldn't. I would say, all I want you to do for your diet right now is to increase your consumption of fruits and vegetables. That's it. That's all I would have them do. I don't want them to take anything out of their diet yet. I just want them to put fruits and vegetables into their diet. And then perhaps they eat exactly what they do, plus some fruits and vegetables. But I think in a lot of cases, if they do stay on top of eating their fruits and vegetables, Those will kind of take the place of some of the other foods that are in their diet. And then I wouldn't say, hey, I want you to go start this resistance training and high intensity interval training routine 6 days a week. I would say, I just want you to go on a walk for 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes a day, just a super low intensity walk. And that's it. Those are the two changes I'd start with. Add fruits and vegetables and add a brief walk. And I would want that person to do that until it's a habit, until they're used to eating fruits and vegetables every day. It's just what they do. And then they go on a brief little walk after lunch each day. It's just what they do. At that point, it's a habit, and we can then add on to it and continue to make better habits. So at that point, they're used to eating fruits and vegetables. What I would probably do is have them cut back on their portion sizes a little bit. Now, depending on what they eat, that might not be the case. Maybe the best thing to do, depending on the person, is to cut back on the types of unhealthy foods that they're eating because they're so hyperpalatable and they don't fill them up. But I think in a lot of cases, it would be good to just have the person eat a little bit less of what they do now. I think that's a very useful tool. And so they're eating fruits and vegetables, and now they're eating a little bit less. And then if the person was used to going on their 10, 15-minute walk, perhaps the next step I would do is to have them go on a 20, 30-minute walk at this point. And then I might add a little bit of resistance training. But it doesn't need to be bodybuilder type training, powerlifter type training. I just want them to be intentionally using their muscles for some sort of exercise. So again, depending on the weight and the abilities of the person, it could just simply be like a box squat, sitting down and standing up off a box or a chair. It could be high knees. It could be using some light dumbbells to do some rows and some curls and some shoulder presses. Again, very low intensity, very sort of beginner level. But again, at this point, I want them to do both of these new habits until they are habits. At this point, now that this is a habit, they're continually eating less food than they used to. They're eating more fruits and vegetables, and they have sort of a structured exercise program that's going on maybe 3, 4, 5 days a week. Then when this is a habit, that's when I want to start changing the foods that they eat. For some people, it can be tricky. Some people have an initial aversion to healthy alternatives of foods. But what I want to try and do is take the foods that they already enjoy eating and just make little tweaks. So for example, replace their bread with a whole grain bread. And if they're making meatballs or lasagna or things like that, or if they're having a really fatty ribeye steak, I just want to change it out for a leaner ground beef, a leaner cut of steak that they're more used to eating. A big change I really, really like to make for people that some people really get mad at me for wanting them to try and make, some of my clients, is trading out your cooking oils for a spray oil. Now, some people have an aversion to that. They think that, these processed foods are bad for you, and, spray oil is not close enough to its original source to be good. And to that, I understand. I don't agree with you. It's not bad for you to have spray oils. Seed oils is a whole topic right now, and it's a topic that I can get into in a later episode. I'm not going to do it now. In short, they're fine for you. Don't worry about it. But if that's the case, then it's going to be a little more money, but I might encourage them to get a spray olive oil or avocado oil that might be considered a little more holistic. Just because when you're using straight oil or straight butter, it really kind of takes a lot to get the pan covered evenly when you're cooking, and it just increases your calories by quite a bit. Anyways, in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that I would, at this point, start to change the types of food that they're eating. And then in terms of their exercise, I would increase their intensity of what they're already doing. So perhaps if they were doing some, easy resistance training, I might increase the weight or the types of exercise so that they are a little more challenging, not anything crazy, hopefully, but just they have to push themselves a little more. Maybe instead of going on a walk, they go on a brisk walk or a jog. And then I hope from here you guys are able to kind of see how this is going to scale. At this point, we're going to probably track their calories and restrict types of food. We're going to change the structure of their meals completely. We're going, at this point, you can start to make radical changes. But the point is that if you take someone who is very obese and has no interest or experience with exercise, and immediately you change them from Pop-Tarts and McDonald's and full sugar soda to just salads and chicken breast and super long 2-hour workouts in the gym and long runs, not only are they probably going to not do very well at it, they're probably just going to give up, and you've done nothing really productive for them. I want to install these very small habits very gradually. Now, the next piece of advice that I would give, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what I've just talked about, is to avoid a crash diet. I've never heard an instance of a crash diet going well ever. And of course, when you start it, you don't know it's a crash diet. I don't think most people go into it and say, "Oh, I'm going to start a crash diet." But a crash diet is called that because it's such an extreme restricting diet that people just don't stick to it. Now, a goofy example, I find it goofy, but it was a real big thing, I think in the 50s and 60s, was something called the cabbage soup diet. And it is exactly what it sounds like. It was a diet where people could eat nothing but cabbage soup. It was primarily marketed towards women who were supposed to be skinny and thin and not weigh very much for their husbands, and it was incredibly restrictive. Not only was it restricting, a certain macronutrient, it was excluding all types of food except for cabbage soup all the time, which is, first of all, you're probably going to be deficit in a lot of micronutrients. Second of all, you're getting very little, if any at all, protein in your diet, and then you're just not going to stick to it. You're going to rebound. And I think a lot of the issue with these crash diets too is people don't realize that they failed because the diet is so poorly designed, and they think that they fail because they are not good enough at dieting, and they give up and they think that being healthy is just not for them. Now, the next thing I would recommend is to consume things like whole foods. I think the benefits of eating whole foods, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables are incredible, just because they have things like fiber, they have vitamins and minerals, and even beyond that, they have things called phytochemicals, which are just chemicals found in plants. That's what phyto means. But these phytochemicals are often cancer protective, they're antioxidants. They can be very, very, very good for you. And I encourage lots of people to eat them for their health, but as well as when we're eating more fiber and we're eating more protein, as I've already discussed, we're going to feel more full. There's another style of eating called volumetrics, which has to do with the volume of food. And basically what it means is to try and focus on eating foods. Usually it means they have a high water content, again, like fruits and vegetables. Popcorn is kind of a thing because it has big volume, although when you chew it and swallow it, it ends up not taking quite as much space. But the idea with volumetrics is that I believe the idea is that it's supposed to have more grams per serving than it has calories. I'm not exactly sure on that, but I hope you get the idea. It's supposed to be sort of a bigger portion of food with less calories in it. And usually that is obtained by eating things like produce that have a high water content. Sometimes it can also mean eating a lean protein like a chicken breast. And then the last thing, this is again kind of anecdata. It's just a piece of advice that I would give you, but I found it something that's very useful for me, is when I have a plan and I write it out. One thing that I used to do that I got very kind of tired and stressed out of was that I would track my calories every single day. And I mean, it worked. I was conscious of what I was eating and I was able to manipulate my body weight doing that. The only thing was that to weigh out and measure and scan barcodes and find foods on my calorie tracking app for every single food I eat every single day, it just got to be a lot of work. And some people don't find that to be a problem. And if not, that's great. But I kind of did find it to be a little just fatiguing. So what I did that I found helped me very much is that I would, do that same process, count calories, track the foods that I was going to eat in my app, but then I would do it once. And I'd write that full day of eating down on a chart, make sure that my nutrient levels were met and make sure that it was ideal for calories and fiber and protein. then I'll write that full day of eating out and I hang it up on my fridge. And then every day, some people don't like eating like this, granted, but every day I'll eat this same exact meal plan. Sometimes I'll have, 2 or 3 different meal plans. Usually my breakfast and lunch are the same because I enjoy eating that way. It's simple. I don't get sick of the same foods, but it just takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. I don't have to track it every single day because it's already been tracked. So I can just eat what I've written down on this sheet of paper on my fridge, know that my nutrition is where it ought to be. The last piece of advice I'm going to give you about fat loss before we transition into the muscle gain phase of this podcast is that consistency is more important than everything. Consistency is the most important thing. If you could pick any diet, no matter how effective the diet is at stimulating weight loss, if you are not able to stick to it consistently, it is not going to work. Now, you are going to be the product of what you do most of the time. And the issue is that some people will, really just have very bad diet habits throughout the week, but then they're, Friday for lunch I had a spinach salad, and I had like low fat yogurt this week too instead of full fat yogurt. And that's good. Those are good steps, but it's a very small fraction of all of the eating that you did throughout the week. It is not going to really do anything if you can't stick to it consistently. And the example that I wanted to share with you guys here is that of my older sister. I don't know if she listens to this podcast, so maybe she's going to hear that I shouted her out. Maybe not. But my older sister, she is a paraplegic, which just means that she is paralyzed. She cannot move or feel from her waist down. So, of course, she's in a wheelchair. And because of that, she has very real challenges for controlling her weight, right? I mean, she eats the same as everybody, but her calories out, especially her non-exercise activity, is really pretty low. And in fact, in a lot of ways, because of the disconnect in the nerves from the brain and the spinal cord to the legs, that can even decrease your basal metabolic rate. And it's presented to her some really difficult circumstances to try and control her body weight. But she has been trying really, really, really hard to stick with it and to get healthier and to lose weight. And I want to say now she's been working on her weight loss journey for probably 2, maybe 3 years. And I think she's lost probably 30 pounds by now, which is substantial. This is a great difference for her, and it's going to improve her metabolic health in many, many ways. But the reason I bring that up is because 30 pounds, though substantial, when considered over the course of 2 to 3 years, is like half a pound a week, which is, for most people, like visually, there's no change week to week. And for many people, it is incredibly discouraging. In fact, some people do better with a faster weight loss that's more calorie restricted because they can see those physical changes in their body composition, in the ways that their clothes fit, and that's motivating to them. Now, my sister has gone so slow and steady, but she's done it super consistently for years now. And because of that, because she's been patient and consistent with her diet, she is in a much better place now than she was before. And I think she is a wonderful, wonderful example.